there's the slide.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to our special panel presentation, Come From Away, the Start of the Moment. I'm Andy Razzle, and I work at Memorial University's Hair Center. And today's panel is part of the 17th International Small Island Studies Association, or ISISA, conference, Sharing Lessons, Sharing Stories. This 5-day event is being hosted by the Hair Center, and we're so happy to be welcoming attendees from around the world, from China, Australia, and Scotland, to PEI, New Brunswick, and Toronto. While the majority of that conference is for those who registered, today's panel is open to the public, and the Hair Center has partnered with Memorial's Office of Alumni Engagement to bring this event to Newfoundlanders and CFAs alike, those living here and around the globe. So before we begin, I want to acknowledge that the lands on which Memorial University's campuses are situated are in the traditional territories of diverse Indigenous groups, and we acknowledge with respect the histories and cultures of the Beothuk, the Mi'kmaq, the Innu, and the Inuit of this province. We encourage everyone to reflect on these lands from where you are located this morning and to consider the Indigenous peoples for whom these lands are traditional territory. We are recording this event and it is streaming live on YouTube. You'll be able to watch and share that recording later today. So if you have a question for any of the panelists, we ask that you send them in through the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And please feel free to use the chat function. Let us know if you've been lucky enough to have seen Come From Away yourself, or share with us your own memories of that day in 2001 when the planes were grounded in Gander. And now we'll get things going, and I'll pass things over to our host for today, Alumni Engagement's Janet Harron, who is joining us from Petty Harbour, Newfoundland. Welcome, Janet.
Thank you, Mandy. Hi, everybody from a very foggy Petty Harbour. I think it's foggy everywhere. I'm really excited about hosting today's event. I am also a Come From Away, as you can tell by the way I speak, also known as a Newfoundlander by choice. And I have to say that moving to St. John's from Toronto in 2007 was the best decision that myself and my family have ever made. It was indeed the start of a moment for which I will be forever grateful. Now, that being said, with the 20th anniversary of 9/11 approaching this September, we thought it was an apt moment to take a closer look at the sensation that is the Come From Away musical. I'm here with 4 amazing people who are going to share their own perspectives on the phenomenon that has come from away and how it changed their lives. Derm and Diane Flynn's real life experiences were immortalized in the musical. They are joining us from their home in Appleton, Newfoundland. Actress Petrina Bromley, BA Music 94, MUN alumnus, is one of 2 Newfoundlanders, along with Romano Danilo from the original Broadway cast, and she is in St. John's. And finally, we are so happy that Alina Sergachov, who graduated with her master's in folklore in 2019, is able to join us today from Israel. As an international graduate student in Memorial's folklore department, Alina researched Come From Away. Now, before we get deeper into their incredible stories, we're going to press rewind and do a quick recap of the events immortalized in the musical. At 9:30 a.m. on September 11th, the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration made the decision to shut down its airspace, forcing over 4,000 planes to land at the nearest airport. All inbound flights from Europe were diverted to Canada. Although officials in Gander were first told that only 18 planes would be flying into the airport and no passengers leaving their planes, ultimately, 38 planes landed and 6,500 passengers were stranded for 5 days. The population of Gander, Newfoundland almost doubled as a result. The plane people were taken to churches, schools, and community centers in Gander and neighboring towns. They had absolutely no idea what was going on and received periodic updates from their pilots. Newfoundlanders from across the province traveled to Gander and area to help. The plane people were given food, clothing, places to stay, and reassurance that the world was a good place during a terrible time. Meanwhile, in Toronto, lawyer and theater producer Michael Rubinoff was inspired by the stories coming out of Gander. He realized that there was a way of musicalizing the events by using Newfoundland's strong oral and songwriting traditions. And in 2011, on the 10th anniversary of the attacks, writers Irene Sankoff and David Hine visited Gander to interview locals and returning passengers. Among those were Derm and Diane Flynn. Come From Away was workshopped in 2012 and first produced at Sheridan College in Oakville, Ontario. After record-breaking runs in San Diego, Seattle, Washington, D.C., and Gander, with 2 sold-out shows at the Hockey Arena, which is also known as the world's largest walk-in refrigerator, and Toronto, not to forget Toronto, Come From Away opened on Broadway in 2017. And man, did it ever make a splash. It received 7 Tony Awards that year. Tony nominations, sorry, not awards. Director Chris Ashley received the Tony for Best Direction of a Musical. And in 2019, the UK production swept the Oliviers in London, taking home a total of 4 awards, including the coveted prize for Best New Musical. In October 2018, Come From Away became the longest running Canadian musical in history. Prior to COVID, it was performing on 3 continents with 5 different production companies. Thankfully for audiences everywhere, the tour is supposed to resume in the fall of 2021. And performances have already begun again in Australia, and the UK tour is opening this summer. And of course, in addition to the play itself, this amazing story has included spin-offs, including documentaries, books, and the upcoming Apple Plus broadcast of the Broadway show set to air in September 2021. Wow. So now we're on to our guests. We're going to begin chronologically with Derm and Diane explaining what happened in real life back in 2001. Petrina is then going to tell her story of being in the cast, and then we'll hear Alina talk about Come From Away from an academic perspective. And hopefully we'll be able to circle back to hear from Derm and Diane about their international travels associated with touring with the Come From Away production. And we'll follow all of that with a short Q&A. So you can post your questions in the chat. So on to Derm and Diane Flynn in Appleton. Derm Flynn was the mayor of Appleton, Newfoundland from 1993 to 2018. Diane Flynn, also known as the Queen of George Street, describes herself as a downtown girl rescued by a bayman. Now both retired, the Flynns split their time between Appleton, St. John's, and their beloved cabin, and are proud parents and grandparents. So Derm and Diane, I don't even have to ask you the question, but can you tell us a bit about your experiences during September 2001?
Well, obviously, it's 20 years and almost 20 years. Will be in September the 11th. But it seems like only yesterday. And I guess that's just because we here in Appleton have been involved in the whole 9/11 experience right from the word go, and continue to be today, I guess, as we speak. So being a mayor of a small town of about 700 people at the time, things are pretty normal. I mean, we're as normal as any other town. We're not Toronto, we're not St. John's, we're not Gander. We're a very small town, but the only difference in small towns and large towns is the size of the problems and the size of the budgets and all that type of thing. The same thing happens in small towns as it do in large towns. There's all kinds of issues. There's roaming cats and dogs, and there's potholes, and there's all of those things. But Appleton is 23 kilometers west of Gander, Gander International Airport. And, obviously we were one of the places that when 9/11 hit, as Janet, as you ably explained about the number of planes and the passengers, when 6,000 plus passengers show up in a place where there's only 500 hotels like Gander, where are you going to put them all? How are you going to feed them all? So quickly, all of the towns in central Newfoundland, within an hour's drive of Gander, became spots to stuff people for what we thought was really a 24-hour, maybe an overnight situation and that type of thing. But as we quickly found out, it was going to be almost a week. So, you know, you just get about a half an hour's notice, and you've got a bunch of people coming from 98 countries actually were represented in the group from that were deplaned in Gander. And of course, those people were sitting on planes for some of them 24 hours. And it was, you know, I mean, once they got off, they had nothing but basically clothes on their back. It wasn't a time when everybody had carry-on luggage and that type of thing. That came later. They had the cell phones, if they had them, were not hooked into the network in Newfoundland, so they couldn't even use their cell phones. And in most cases, the batteries were low on any of the ones that would work anyhow. So it was a situation that we had a whole bunch of people come all at one time. The people in Gander at the command center did a marvelous job of taking those in, getting them registered, and shipping them out wherever we could find a place to put their heads and a place that they might be able to find a meal or whatever. And that's when we stepped in, as did all of the other communities in central Newfoundland, to deliver, you know, the best that we could to them. And you mentioned the things that they needed: bedding, clothing, food, obviously. But the one thing that they needed most that you couldn't buy, and of course you couldn't buy a meal in Gander at the time because everything was just gone crazy, but you couldn't buy tender loving care and a warm shoulder to lean your head on, because those people were crazy scared. They didn't know what was going on. They didn't know why they were here where they were. They didn't know where they were in most cases. And they were just looking for someone to talk and be friendly to them. And people like Diane, of course, who's a hugger anyhow before COVID and still occasionally breaks the rules, were people like that. And we were just a small sample of the volunteers, that hundreds and hundreds that came forward to offer that kind of assistance.
I think the big thing is that most of these people, when they were getting off the planes, didn't even know why they were landing in Gander. And like, they were totally confused. A lot of them didn't even see pictures of what was going on until they got to their location. You know, and they needed to contact their families to let them know that they were okay and that they were in a safe place. They were confused, they were crying, they needed love, they needed a hug, they needed somebody to talk to. Some of them just needed some peace and quiet to try to comprehend what was going on. I mean, couldn't believe what was going on in their country, you know, and so I think we did a pretty good job of comforting them and providing what they needed. The thing is that I think they were so appreciative of what was being done for them that they didn't make any demands. And it didn't matter what their status was in life. Everybody was treated the same. Like, it didn't matter if you were a multimillionaire or if you were down to the last dollar in your pocket. Everybody was treated the same. And the thing is, our volunteer, you didn't have to ask people to come out. They were down to the town hall. They were to the schools in Gander. They were to the community centers. They were everywhere saying, what can we do? Yeah. As Newfoundlanders do. You know, if somebody's in need, then we're there to help them.
There were certainly, you know, there was so many people that just they were totally confused, as Diane said. I mean, and you know, trying to get a hold of their families, because the news stories and the talking heads on TV and everything were giving out report after report about attacks in of course at New York City and at the Pentagon. These were the most ones, but there was all kinds of stories about America was under attack, which meant that America is not just the US of America, it's Canada. You know, people in Canada in high towers were being evacuated and taken to other places and told to go home for the day, because there was a thought that all of those aircrafts possibly were an attack or a security scare. I mean, there were people thinking that every plane in the air was a potential bomb, and you know, that was driving everyone crazy, including our volunteers, I might add, because you know, people were coming out of their homes. We had volunteers that were just as upset as the plane people themselves, especially some of the older people at the time. They're all older, much older now, 20 years later. But I mean, there was that whole feeling that, you know, not only was New York under attack and the Twin Towers and the Pentagon, but all of North America was potentially under attack. Ironically enough, in Newfoundland and in Eastern Canada, there's not as many high towers and that type of thing. I mean, in Gander, you know, we have all kinds of.
We have a 3-story business office tower.
3-story business office tower, and we have lots of. We have we've got lots of skyscrapers. We just put them underside and call them strip malls. So you know, I mean, there's you know, they use, and of course the population of Eastern Canada is much lower. And as we found out after the fact, that was one of the decisions that was made to land as many planes as possible in Atlantic Canada. And we had, Gander wasn't the only airport that had aircrafts. I mean, St. John's had 20 or 25. Halifax had a load of aircrafts.
People forget that.
But the one thing that really changed us or made us a little bit exceptional in central Newfoundland was the number of people, the 6,800 passengers and 500 hotel rooms. You can't, you know, you can do what you like with them, put them heads and tails in bed, but you can't put 6,800 people in 500 hotel rooms. So we had to come up with the accommodations, we had to come up with the food, and people were coming out of their homes with boilers of soup and boilers of stew and pots of goulash and everything. You know, and Diane tells a story about goulash, and you can tell it again.
I always say when this was all over that we could have easily done a recipe book of 101 ways to cook goulash.
You know, it was just a time that so many people were doing so many things and wanted to do so many things. They wanted to help. They wanted to be involved in some way. They didn't want to sit at home and watch the ever repeating TV stories about it. And every time that they came on, the first thing you saw was those aircrafts flying into those towers and the devastation that it was creating. And of course, that has remained with us to this day and always will. The tragedy of 9/11 is really still very fresh in our minds, and always will be fresh in our minds, even though there's been tragedies all over the world, you know, natural tragedies and that type of thing, but man-made tragedies of that magnitude, almost 3,000 people losing their lives in a few moments, you know, for no apparent reason, is there. But we got involved in the aftermath of that. We were brought into it in the aftermath to look after and pick up the pieces of all of those people and try to help them feel that they were safe. They weren't going to be attacked here in Appleton for sure. We don't have any security service or any police service here.
Maybe a barking dog or something.
You know, but you know, the people were just looking for some sense of security and some sense of peace, and we were.
And you provided it. Couldn't have ended up in a better place. So hopefully we're going to get back to Derm and Diane, and they're going to tell us about their experiences with the touring production. But now we're going to go on to Petrina, because we want to make sure we get time for questions. So Petrina Bromley is an actor. Thanks, Derm and Diane. Just don't stay right there. Don't go away. Petrina Bromley is an actor, singer, director, writer, composer, and dog lover from St. John's, Newfoundland. She was last seen locally in What Hangs in the Balance, a one-person show she wrote and recorded live for broadcast on Broadway.com as part of Persistence Theatre, It's Woman's Play series. But Petrina, what we all want to know is, what's it like for a working actor like yourself to land the gig of a lifetime?
It's pretty good. It's really a dream come true for me, and something that I had not even remotely sort of foreseen for myself. I mean, I'm a woman of a certain age. I'm not a spring chicken at all. And I think I was sort of, it's been about a 6-year journey for me with the show. And I don't think at the time that I had any idea how big it was going to get. I auditioned for a show that was going to happen in La Jolla, California. That's all I knew. I didn't even know that we had that contract also included a mounting of the show in Seattle. Like at that point, I didn't know anything. I was like, wow, I'm going to go to California. I never thought that would happen. I never thought I would work in California. I was very content living here in Newfoundland and being a reasonably sized fish in a very small pond in the theater world here. And I was working with a lot with a company here called Artistic Fraud of Newfoundland, who tour across Canada. I've done that many times. Like I thought that was it. That's success. I own a house. I own a car. I'm set. It's not an easy life because it's one of the gig economy kind of jobs. So you only make money when you work, and you only work when there's a gig. But I was, into a kind of a pattern or a way of life that I thought was, this is it. This is great. I'm good. And then this fell out of the sky, which it's probably a bad analogy, but this fell into my lap is what I should say. And has absolutely changed my life. And strangely enough, my story with the show is kind of like an old Hollywood girl in the candy store at the right moment. I was in Gander during the 10th anniversary with Rising Tide Theatre, which is a local company here in Newfoundland, and went into a coffee shop with another actor from Toronto, Grant Tilley, and the only other people in there were this young couple, and Grant looked over and went, "That's really strange. I know them. They're from Toronto. They write musicals." And here, this was David and Irene with their little cards getting ready to go interview people. They were organizing things on the table. So we said hello, and they said what they were doing there. And I was like everybody else in Gander at the time. When I heard they were writing a musical about 9/11, I was like, okay, very good. Good luck to you. And this is probably something that people from islands have a sense of in general, that when someone comes from away to tell a story about you, you tend to get your back up a little, because they're going to have a lens on you that is not as genuine as what someone from the place would have. So you're getting someone's outside opinion of what it's like to be in this place. And so I was a little, it's like, okay, a couple of mainlanders are going to tell our story, and was a little, skeptical about it all. But we stayed in touch, and they saw me perform in Toronto a couple of times, and I got invited to audition and was fortunate enough to land the part. And then went to La Jolla. We did the very first professional production was at the La Jolla Playhouse in San Diego. And that whole process, it was a very long process to get the show up, because with a new piece of theater, you want to take your time, and there are things that you don't discover about the show until you get it up and start seeing things happen and realize that doesn't really flow into that the way I thought it would on the page, or this the staging of this moment is more complicated, or there's things that are going to shift while you're rehearsing and crafting the show. So I think we had like a 6-week rehearsal process, including the tech time and all that sort of stuff. And there were things that like hit the floor. That scene never saw the light of day. This scene came out of nowhere. This was other people singing this song. Now it's these people singing that song. So there was a lot of, I'm going to sneeze, pardon me. I have like a seasonal allergy thing happening. No, okay, I caught it. So there was constant change, and there really wasn't time during that whole initial process to step outside and see the whole picture. Because as an actor, your whole thought process tends towards what my job is, what do I need to do, what am I responsible for, how do I fit in, what is this character's, track or arc. So it really wasn't until we got it up in front of an audience that that I kind of sat back and went, oh, this is actually really good. I had no idea that it was going to be something that people even liked, because I was so like tunnel focused on making sure I did what I was supposed to do, and that I helped as much as possible, and that I, you know, was servicing the play. And as at that point in time, I was the only Newfoundlander involved, and I did have a little chip on my shoulder of, okay, you gotta make sure they tell this correctly and don't paint caricatures of us and use the stereotypes and all that kind of stuff. And that ended up not being an issue at all, because Chris Ashley, our director, is from a small town himself. And in the very first days and weeks of rehearsal, he actually said, it's important to me that everybody has respect and dignity and is portrayed as an actual real person and not as a cartoon image of someone. Because him being from a small town knows that that happens. So that was all great. And of course, David and Irene are such lovely people that they had drawn the pictures of these people through the script as honestly and genuinely as possible. So there was never a question that it was going to be kind of a buffoony send up of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, because we have often in the past been caricatured. So that was all great. And then we got it in front of an audience, and the audience just loved it. And we were all like, oh, okay, great, good. It's good. I think people like it. And we were having sold out runs and standing ovations and all that sort of thing. And I think the greatest testament to the show is that I think it might have even been the very first preview. Chris Ashley said, oh, I guess we should play something while people leave, because the show would just end, right? The end, welcome to the rock, boom, it's over. So they mocked something up for the band to play while the audience was leaving, is what it was supposed to be. And nobody left. So the second night, they actually choreographed something for the band to come out from their spots and come down onto the stage and have a moment, because people were just clapping and enjoying it too much. They weren't leaving like they were supposed to do. So that playoff that now happens, that's called Screech Out instead of Screech In, was kind of born through that, because people were still feeling so much joy and emotion that they wanted to stay and continue to celebrate that moment. And that to me is kind of like the microcosm of what this whole entire journey has been, is people are swept up and they want to stay and enjoy and live in that moment as long as they possibly can. And certainly that's how I feel about my relationship to the show. I want to live in this moment as long as possible.
Wow. And really quickly, so what's it like? What was it like to be on, like, what was it like when you first opened on Broadway? Like, isn't that kind of like the pinnacle for someone like yourself?
It was everything, because there's so much involved in that. We were opening, but we had played in several cities before where we knew we had a really genuinely, honestly positive response from people. And I think myself and Astrid Van Weeren and Lee McDougall, the three Canadians on stage, we were all Broadway newbies. This was our Broadway debut. And I remember us having a conversation at one point about how much more nervous we would be if we didn't trust the show as much as we did. If we didn't know that people are going to respond to it. And we had a preview evening where there were first responder families and first responders and docents from the 9/11 memorial. Like, the audience was full of people who had very personal attachment to the events of the day. And they were a quieter audience, but at the end, they were very joyful at the end. So we had that experience and knew that was a good time. But yeah, I'd also heard horror stories of like I had an apartment rented for 2 months because I'd heard horror stories of, we went to the opening night party of our show and got told there that we were closing. Because when the reviews come out, if the reviews decide that you aren't their cup of tea, then that can actually sink you. And so I was nervous about all of that, but that very quickly was put to the side because the reviews came in and they were lovely.
Awesome. It's fantastic. Okay. Petrina's going to stay right there. Now we're going to move on to Alina. Alina is a native of Belarus who came to Newfoundland and Labrador via Israel. And she's been called an international diplomat by none other than her fellow panelist, Derm Flynn. As part of her graduate studies in folklore at Memorial University, she saw Come From Away 10 times in 3 different countries. So Mandy's going to share some photos that Alina took while doing her research, and she's going to tell us a bit about them. But first, Alina, where's Alina?
Can you see me? Yeah.
Oh, I can see you. There you are. Hi. First, I want to ask Alina, what first drew you to the Come From Away story, and how did you connect to it as an international graduate student here in St. John's? Like, how did that first start?
I started my master's degree at MAN in September 2017, and right away one of my profs told me about this musical called Come From Away. She said, it's about Newfoundland, so if you're going to visit New York, you should see it. So she told me about it in September. In December, I went to New York City to meet with my mom, and of course we went to see Come From Away. It was on December 20th. And it was heartwarming and mind-blowing, and we laughed and cried. And I didn't know anything about the Operation Yellow Ribbon beforehand. So I wanted to learn more. And at the time, I was a research assistant at the Memorial University of Newfoundland Folklore and Language Archive. So naturally, as soon as I returned to St. John's, I asked my boss, Pauline Cox, do you have any materials about these stories, like personal experience narratives? I want to read more. I want to find out more about it. And she said, like, no, unfortunately, we don't. And I started thinking, like, okay, how? Where can I find out more about it? And at the time, I was also taking the public folklore course. And my instructor, Dale Jarvis, gave us an assignment to write a fake research proposal for Helen Crichton grade. So it's something about Atlantic Canada region, and it's fake. So I chose to document the 9/11 stories in Gander and surrounding communities. And since we weren't actually supposed to apply for the grant itself, none of my classmates applied, but I did. And I got the funding, to my astonishment. So of course I went to Gander. And David Hine was there for a Geek Fest in Gander. And I was like, oh my God, David Hine is going to be in Gander, and I'm going to Gander.
I think we have a picture of that though, Alina. So anyway, so we're going to start the pictures that Mandy has, and we're going to ask you to talk about the pictures. So let's just see. I think the first one is... here we go. Okay, so here you are with the kissing the cod, and there you are with Petrina on the set. Can you tell us a bit about these?
After a meeting with David in Gander, I went to Broadway to interview some people there. My first interview was with Arturo Parazzi, the production stage manager of Come From Away. And he helped me to get in contact with the rest of the cast members and crew members. And one of these interviews was with Petrina Bromley. So after the show, she invited me backstage, and it was such an amazing experience. And we took a picture there. And this is me holding the cod prop. I wasn't squished in properly, but one of the actors convinced me to kiss the fake cod. So I guess it counts, hopefully.
Of course it counts. That's a great picture of you and Petrina. I love that. Okay, what's the next picture, Mandy? I think we got, okay, so who's this guy?
Michael Rubinoff.
Of course. The brain, the guy behind the whole thing.
You know, I accidentally bumped into him at Phoenix Theatre in London. And this picture was taken by Nick Marson, the real Nick from Come From Away. I saw them walk in, and I was like, huh, these people look familiar. And I'm like, this is Michael Rubinoff and real Nick and real Diane. And I was just staring at them for a while. They're like, hi, you probably don't know me, but I'm Alina and I'm a fan. And I was trying to interview Michael for about a year at that point. So he was like, wait, are you Alina that emailed me? And I'm like, yes, hi, nice to meet you. So it was insane, like the coincidence of meeting him there.
That's
Without, you know.
Okay, what's the next picture? Oh, so this is in Gander.
Yeah, daytime. I messaged David on Facebook, and I didn't really expect him to even read my message, but he replied almost immediately. And he agreed to talk about Come From Away, and he gave me the contact information of their agent, Zoe. So we were supposed to meet in Gander at Albatross Hotel on July 12th, 2018. And I arrived early, and I was sitting there like freaking out. I was like actually shaking and sweating. And like 18 minutes before the interview, I saw a man walk in, and I looked at him, and it was David, and he just checked in like 18 minutes before the interview. And then he turned around, and I looked at him, he looked at me, he smiled, and he kept walking. And I just like sat there in the lobby waiting and waiting. It was 4:30, and David wasn't there, like 4:40, 4:50. And I started like worrying. So I emailed his agent, Zoe, like, hi Zoe, like I'm here and David checked in, but I can't see him. Like, do you know what's going on? The interview is about to end and he still isn't here. And she replied immediately, David fell asleep. He just landed in Gander after his flight. He was exhausted. And it was a dark and stormy night, like it was raining buckets, the weather was terrible. So she told me, okay, I woke him up, he's on his way. And he came in wearing a memorial t-shirt. Can you imagine? He was so exhausted that he fell asleep before the interview, and still he put a memorial t-shirt on because he knew that I'm from Man.
That's wonderful.
So yeah, that was amazing.
That's amazing. And we've got one more picture, I think. Oh, we know these two people.
Derm and Diane, we took this picture in Appleton on the anniversary of 9/11 in 2019.
That's awesome.
Such an amazing experience to be there on this date and to meet them again after interviewing them. And Diane Davis gave me a ride to Appleton. Thank you, Diane.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's amazing. Thanks, Alina. Now, listen, we do have a little bit of time to go back to Derm and Diane before we do our Q&A, just to find out a little bit more about their experience as basically international celebrities as part of the Come From Away touring company. So we've got a few pictures of you guys, or I think, yeah. So the first one, which is blows my mind every time, this picture that Mandy's going to show. And so when you guys went for the premiere, this was like, look at that. That is awesome. So where's this, Derm?
Well, this is I'm thinking England or Australia.
Okay.
Obviously, I'm trying to point out where Newfoundland is in the context of things, but the very first at the opening in New York on Broadway, I had brought, somebody said there's people in the audience in Toronto because they had just moved to Broadway from Toronto, and they were saying there was people in the audience in Toronto waving Newfoundland flags and everything. So I grabbed the Newfoundland flag from my connection and took it off to Broadway with me. When I got there, we didn't know until right at the very last minute that we were going to be brought on stage right at the end of the show to the sound of the music that Petrina was speaking of, that was supposed to send people out the door. But anyhow, I had the flag in my hand. I said, well, and all of a sudden someone said, you're going on stage. And as we started to go on stage, I said, what am I going to do with that flag? So I just took it and wrapped it around my shoulders. And Joel Hatch, the guy who played Claude Elliott and myself, one of the people that's one of the 5 or 6 that have played us, came and grabbed me, and I said, what am I going to do with this flag? I didn't know what to do with it. So I just wrapped it around my shoulders and just managed to tie the ends and went on stage with it. And of course, you know, being a proud Newfoundlander, this show is meant so much to this province. It'll mean an awful lot to this province in the future, because it is letting people know where we are, who we are, and what we are and what we're about. And people all over the world want to go to places. If they're going to spend their money, they're going to travel. They want to go to places that are friendly, places that they haven't been, and places that are safe. And we are all of those things to anyone that would come and visit us, including the 6,800 passengers that came at 20 years ago. I mean, it's just that it wasn't an accident that they got treated well in Newfoundland. Anyone that comes here will get treated well. This is the whole group. This is the real people for the most part that they call us now. That's the name they put on us. And when they introduce us as the real people. And you'll see most of our delegation there. I have to say that we were so honored. We are a small group of people that have been designated to represent the thousands of volunteers that came out and served, looked after the people that day. So I mean, it's just an amazing responsibility to have to try to represent those people. Mm-hmm. And obviously, we are representing our province and our country, and that's an amazing responsibility too. And we when we're interviewed by so many, and we get into scrums with the media and all that type of thing. So, you know, we get so many opportunities to tell the story of Newfoundland. They see the story, and they want to know if it's real. And we try to explain to them that it's an ordinary thing that happened in Newfoundland that 20 years later people are celebrating. So that's the nature of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians and people. We just say, come and visit us. Come and visit us. That's the whole message that we leave, and we are so blessed that, you know.
Well, I think the good thing is that we've gotten to places that we never ever dreamed we would ever get to visit, particularly Australia and England and places like that, and Seattle, Washington. But we've gotten to meet some amazing people, like our whole. Well, let's say we call it our come from away family. It's not actors or actresses or anything like that. It's our come from away family, and we feel for them if something goes wrong, somebody loses somebody. And one of the ones in Australia now had a premature baby, and we're watching that baby grow and hopefully improve. And it's amazing. And the whole Junkyard Productions. I mean, the people there, they can't do enough for us. And we love them all. Yeah, we love you too, Petrina, especially. You're the best.
You know, it's so good that we can get to meet those people, and you know, actors are, you know, trying to make a living, and they're trying to tell a story, but they're telling the story about, and in a lot of cases we're sitting in the audience and listening to how they're telling the story, and you know, when we get to meet them for the very first time, especially, it becomes a real emotional, it's a real emotional linkage that just has grown, as Diane said. You know, I mean, the ones that we met, the very first ones that we met in Gander at the stadium, I mean, that was just an absolutely unbelievable uplifting and experience. And when we said, oh, the show is moving on to Toronto, well, I said, well, there's enough Newfoundlanders in Toronto for the first couple of weeks to fill the theater, but they broke every record at the theaters in Toronto, Murphy's Theaters, and moved on to New York and on all over the world, London and Australia. And I mean, and the demand for tickets right now, I mean, interrupted because of COVID, like everything else in our lives. But, you know, right now, the demand for tickets for Come From Away are probably stronger than they were before COVID. I mean, you know, and I know Petrina's anxious to get back on stage, and so are all the other troops, and that will happen fairly soon. Australia is now open. London is opening soon. You know, there's been documentaries made about Come From Away that are being shown on TV, and you know, Apple TV, stuff like that, well, that'll hit into millions of households, and the story will continue to grow. And you know, it's an amazing experience for us, but it is so good that the message that's going out there is so positive about our province, and sure as hell we need the business right now, and we need people to come. And if there's no hotel rooms, we'll stick them in somebody's house.
Yeah, send them a message on Facebook. They'll put you up. People did you have stay in your house?
Pardon?
How many guests how many plain people did you put up in your house?
We ended up with 6 people. We only have 3 bedrooms. It was a small house, but I didn't know that Derm had invited 3, and so I had invited 3, and so we got to the house, and all of a sudden we had 6 people. We had two girls from New York who I thought were best friends, and put them in the bedroom. And it just hit me when I did that. I knocked on the door. I said, "I'm sorry, I didn't even ask you if you knew each other." And they said, "No, we didn't meet till today." I said, "Oh my God, don't worry. We'll make other arrangements." "No, don't worry. We're just happy to have a bed, you know." And we had, as we found out after he left, we had a very rich person sleeping down in our basement, and
In the bar.
in the bar, yeah. And we had Joe from the show, Tom McKee, who was Joe in the show. He was sleeping on the floor down in our basement. So, and Bob in the show. Bob in the show.
Tom McKeon from New York, New Jersey. He's a major player in the production, and really, you know, a fabulous representative of Newfoundland. So the plain people themselves are playing the, you know, they're promoting Newfoundland the hell out of it, more than even we are. So I mean, and it's the fact that it's coming from people that are not from Newfoundland, telling those kind of stories and talking to people and doing interviews is amazing as well. So it's all good, but you know, for people in our age right now, we're not
youngsters.
as young. We're not as young as we look, but except for the hair. But you know, it's an amazing experience, and it's a gut-wrenching, uplifting, tear-jerking experience every time that we go to the shows, and we're there with 1,000 people in the audience, and then there's 1,000 people, 900 of them are probably crying, and they're coming up and trying to talk to you and trying to say hello and trying to invite you to their homes, and you know, and the same thing with the actors.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I've cried every time I've seen the show, and I've probably seen it 50 times, and I can't help but cry. Just today, you know,
talk about it.
It's just an emotional experience. It is.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course it is. Of course it is. Now, listen, do we have any questions out there, people? Because we do have everyone, we do have our panelists here until 11:15 Newfoundland time. So I've got lots of questions. I mean, I could talk to these guys forever. But, oh, Lori has a question in Q&A. Sorry, I'm just going to go over to the Q&A. Okay, here's a question for Petrina from Lori Brinklow. You said that as Islanders, we get our backs up when someone from away comes in and tries to tell our story, something that Islanders around the world can relate to. What was it about David and Irene that they got it? Because they sure seem to get it right. So that's the first question, and there's a 2-part question. So what was it about David and Irene that they got it right? Petrina's muted.
Here I am. Sorry, my computer is being strange. You know, I think what it boils down to is when they went to Gander and Appleton, Cambo, Lewisport, all those communities for the 10th anniversary, they tell their story as they had their own come from away experience, because they were there on some kind of arts funding grant, which is a very modest amount of money. And as soon as people found out that they were spending the money that they had staying in hotels and things, they were invited to stay in homes instead. And the way, I'm not sure who, Derm and Diane might know who it was, but the story that they tell is that they, someone said, "Here, stay in our place. We'll go up to the cabin. The keys to the car are there, but you're going to want to lock the door because someone's going to come over in the morning to see who you are. So they stayed and became friends with everybody that they're representing. And I think it's because they got to know people so well that they were able to really capture it. And also it's part of the quality of who they are as people. They're just really lovely, genuine, nice people. I don't think they could have done it wrong because of who they are, but it definitely helped that they made these friendships and created these relationships with people.
Okay.
And they went home 10 pounds heavier.
Yes.
And there's a second part of Lori's question, and this is for Petrina as well as for Derm and Diane. Lori's from PEI, and she says on PEI, come from away is sometimes used as a derogatory term. Do you think that the term come from away has better connotations now because of the show?
Absolutely. CFAs, we use CFAs in Newfoundland. I mean, of course, we're into using the short terms like the memorial and the government people are. But you know, it has changed the whole thing. But people that have come from away in Newfoundland, and I've spent a lot of time in PEI, so I know PEI very well. You know, for the most part, despite the way things have changed in the world, people are friendly, you know. And in Newfoundland, I worked for a tourism department one time, and I used to have to go around and tell people that, boy, you got to be charging for that boat trip, or you got to be charging for that meal, because the restaurants are going starving to death because everybody's offering free meals to everybody. So, you know, that's the nature of the beast. And occasionally you'll get the contrary old fella down the wharf will say, boy, I haven't got time to talk to you. I'm trying to make a living hauling a few codfish in or something like that. But, you know, but that's not normal. I mean, normally it's, well, get in the boat and I'll show you how to catch a codfish, you know, or come up to the house and have a cup of tea with the wife, or go up and have a cup of tea with the wife because I'm too busy to talk to you. You know, I mean, so that's the nature. And people that come to our province will get that kind of feeling pretty quickly. So it's no negative connotation anymore with it. And I think come from away has helped with that too. So
yeah, I can attest to that as a come from away myself, who's now lived here for 14 years. I'm telling you, I felt very welcome immediately. Now here's a question for Alina. Why do you think Come From Away had such an incredible impact on the world? Even the harshest of critics had to admit it was a delight. Just what is it about the play's themes that appeal to so many people? So that's for Alina.
I can tell you why it means so much for me. I'm not sure about the rest of the world, but for me, I'm from Israel. So I grew up being told, like, never admit that you're Israeli abroad, like never speak Hebrew overseas, like say that you're from Belarus, like that's it. And in Come From Away, for me, the main message is be anxious for nothing. When I come to St. John's, people kept asking me, obviously because of my accent, like, where are you from? And I always like freaked out a little. I'm like, what should I say? What should I say? Like, should I say I'm from Israel? Like, what if they'll be really mean and like mad at me because, like, you know, Israel, like politics, it's kind of complicated. So I kept saying, like, I'm from Belarus proudly, like for the first semester. And then in December, I saw Come From Away. And after returning to St. John's, I said, like, I'm from Belarus and Israel. And at first I was like a bit like scared, but people were very kind and like they were okay with me being Israeli. So I was like, okay. And that's when I felt at home in St. John's for the first time.
Mm-hmm. That's a great answer. Just that sense of like that welcomingness, that it's okay and you can be here and it's okay and you're not being judged and you're welcome. That's awesome. Here's a question for all the panelists. What were some of the challenges or difficulties? Maybe this is more for Petrina, but what were some of the challenges or difficulties with telling such an emotionally charged story on stage? That's a good question.
Yeah, there are so many moments in the show that are heavy and deal with really sensitive things. And I credit again our director, Chris Ashley, for telling us, you know, our job is to tell people what happened, not to tell them how to feel. So we very plainly present what the information is. It's not, our job is not to get up there and weep and gnash our teeth and live every moment. It's to tell you so that you can experience your own reaction to it. And so we had to, in the early days, kind of let a lot of stuff out, have conversations about where we were and what, because I mean, you're talking about actors who were living in New York at the time. I wasn't. I was here in Newfoundland, but there were people who have really powerful personal stories in the company about where they were and what was happening at the time. So we kind of had to vent all that out and let that out and then put it to the side, because it's not our therapy session. It's a story that we are there to share. And the wonderful thing about the show is that the writers really balanced the happy and the sad all the time. They don't let you stay in a lull of emotion, sad emotion for any length of time. And again, David and Irene credit the Newfoundlanders in Gander and Gambo and Appleton when they were there visiting for the first time, is that they noticed that there's a quirk to Newfoundlanders, because we're all storytellers, right? Like everyone wants to be in the middle of something, making people laugh and telling a story and sharing a yarn. So David says that as a people, while we're telling you something, if we can see that you're being affected by it, we'll throw in a joke. Because we don't want to deal with you being sad. So it's like, okay, let's turn this around and we'll lighten the moment with some kind of levity of some sort. So they kind of tried to do that with the telling of the show. So the show never sits in a low for a very long period of time. Yeah.
And I will say that we get us real people, they call us again, get asked all the time, which cast is the best? Because we've seen them all now. We've been at all the openings and everything.
Yeah.
And we say they're all great. The casting, the people that do the casting for these shows are doing an absolutely fabulous job. You know, they didn't go out and select all A-list actors or actresses to play the roles. They went out and in a lot of cases, actors and actresses who are trying to make a living like everyone else in Newfoundland and Labrador. And they did such a marvelous job. And I mean, we've never been able to say, oh, one fellow is better than this one. I mean, who's playing you or whatever, is he playing better than that one? You know, Big George from Toronto, I mean, is fantastic. And Joel is fantastic, and all the others, and Peter and all the others that are playing, but they all do it in a different way. It's the very same story though. There's no deviation from the story that you see in Australia or the story that you see in London or the story you see in New York or Toronto. It's always the same story. Or the traveling cast going throughout the States and North America, it's always the same story, and that's in itself is a real testament to how strong the storyline is. Because I mean, people can't just divert and start all of a sudden changing, as Petrina knows very well. I mean, so it's a very important thing. But the actors and actresses, they are as tied into Newfoundland. In a lot of cases, they have never set foot on Newfoundland themselves. They are all coming because they send a few every time they get a chance. But it is a fabulous thing, the way that they're doing it.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, though, about the authenticity of the actors themselves, that they haven't put in like a huge big name to perform and come from away, right? Because that would take you out of that moment, right? That authenticity of the moment. We got a couple of other questions here. For any and all of the panelists, what does living on an island mean to you? And what does come from away say about island life? This is a really good question. I guess it's for Petrina or Derm and Diane.
Joan Morrissey said, "Thank God we're surrounded by water." So it's helped us with COVID a little bit, but it's also, you know, I guess there's no accidental tourists in Newfoundland. There's people that take their time and decide that they're going to come next year, the year after, or whenever the skies open up again. So, you know, it's good like that. It obviously has all kinds of challenges, as Petrina, and we won't go into all of those because we've been here for a week talking about all those.
But I think too, being on an island, you know your neighbors, you know the people around you, and you become involved in your communities, and you develop more of a. It's not a big island. It's like the island is kind of like one person. And if something goes wrong with somebody, you're there to help. You're there to help your neighbors. You share. Like it's just a great thing to live on an island.
I'll second all that. Yeah, I think there's something to the isolation. It has its negatives, but there are positives to it as well, in that you do create community in a way that I don't think you do in. And we're like Diane was just saying, we're a small population on an island. So the communities are quite tight because they are so small. And I love that, Derm, is so true. There are no accidental tourists in Newfoundland. You can't just wind up in Newfoundland. You have to very intentionally come here because it's actually hard to get here.
When our main fishery closed 30 years ago, our cod fishery closed, our cultural community took over, and we have one of the strongest cultural communities in the world.
Absolutely.
People from Ireland, learned people from Ireland, researchers coming over and trying to find the Irish music that was lost 100 years ago in Ireland, and they're finding roots of it up on the southern shore of Newfoundland and in Fogo and in places like that. So, I mean, our culture, our cultural background and the music that they're hearing there is all. It's all very, very strong, and I mean, and that's a real blessing to all of us. There are thousands of actors and actresses in Newfoundland. They just never made a stage yet, but they're out there. As Petrina said, they're always willing to tell you a story or spend some time with you.
Every kitchen in Newfoundland has an actor in it.
Listen, this is a great question from Noel. He's saying a choir from St. John's attended Come From Away in New York a couple of years ago. After it ended, the choir sang the Ode to Newfoundland from their place in the audience. Do panel members have memories of extraordinary reactions to the show by audience members or groups? Wow, that's amazing.
That was Les Mis.
Just to go back to the Ode to Newfoundland, after the opening of Petrina in New York, it was the biggest party I think I ever attended. The after party was given at Gotham Hall in New York. There's 1,400 guests at this after party. And, they brought Shanneyganock up from Newfoundland to play the music. They brought Newfoundland Screech in. They brought in Fish from Newfoundland. It was a party of parties, and the New Yorkers and all those were there in their fineries and all of that. And Shanneyganock now were playing, and they were down there just kind of going like this, and us Newfoundlanders started getting out to dance. And finally, after about set 2, we managed to drag some of them out. But in between sets, we found out actually that who had won the hockey, or the
Newfoundland had won.
Brad Gushu had won the curling, and the Yahoo. Anyway, all us Newfoundlanders got up in front of Shanneyganock with our Newfoundland flag, and that's what we did. We, in front of this 1,400 people, we sang the Ode to Newfoundland. So.
It wasn't a choir variety or quality, but it was pretty good, especially after having a few drinks of Screech in us.
I tell you one really incredible moment that happened in New York. It must have been during the first year of the run. We got to the end of the show, and we're, taking our bows and all that stuff. And from the front of the theater, someone was trying to get up on the stage, like climbing up the roots that are part of the stage to get on stage. And they had to kind of someone had to come down and they actually brought him backstage for a second just to get him out of the way. We were all like, what is happening? But it was a gentleman who I believe was from Germany, what he was doing was he was trying to come up on stage to say, I was there. It was incredible. He was so overcome with reliving it all and having those, memories brought back to him, and I guess the joy of how much he enjoyed the show. He wanted to come up and let us know immediately.
I think one of probably the most emotional time I saw the cast was in Gander.
It was ridiculous. Yeah, we went to Gander. We brought the show. The producers brought the show to Gander in a concert version. We couldn't, because there's a rotate, and the lights and the trees and all that. It was impossible to bring all of that with us. But we did a sort of a stand-up at Mike's concert version of the show in Gander in the largest walk-in refrigerator arena. And for us, it was so overwhelming and so emotional to come out onto that stage for all of the people who had actually lived the experience. And the crowd was so supportive. Like, I don't know that we could have done wrong, but we were afraid that we would, because you don't know how people are going to react when you tell their story to them. And when we sing Heave Away, which is a song that people in Newfoundland know, everybody in the audience started to sing along. And we were like, there were so many moments when we were all individually overcome with emotion at the responses that were happening. People, to be in that audience and to hear Claude's name or Bonnie's name or Doug's name and know who those people are, I assume it must have been kind of an out-of-body experience. I mean, Derm, Diane, you guys can talk about that, but to see yourselves reflected up there must have been wild.
Now we've got one more question for Alina, and then we're going to show quickly, like a really short video of the play, and then we're going to say goodbye. So, and then, so Alina, has the experience of researching this story influenced the direction of your academic future?
Not really. Unfortunately, I was supposed to do a PhD at MON, but because of the COVID-19 and everything, I decided to return to Israel because I'm the only child, and being so far away from my family, I just couldn't do it anymore. I was too anxious and it felt too selfish because my parents live alone in Israel. Like, what if they need anything? So right now I'm taking a break from the academic world. Maybe in the future, hopefully, but right now, no.
Okay.
But I keep interviewing people on Zoom. So I interviewed many people from the Toronto company, New York company, and London companies, the tour company, and the real people, the plane people, the fans. So hopefully I'll be able to keep interviewing people about their comfortable experience.
That's wonderful. That's fantastic. Okay, here we go. We're going to show the video really quickly. Or maybe not. No.
Not gonna do voice.
Not gonna do it, Mandy. Oh, no, it's not working, Mandy. No, we've got to cut that. There's some pictures. We can see pictures.
Pictures are there for sure, yeah.
Yeah, and that's cool.
That's Australia.
Yeah.
I'm going to say this is the Australian company. Yeah, that's Kelly there as Bonnie.
The set is incredible, right? The set is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And Mandy, throw up that picture of Derm and Diane in their tartan, which I love. In their tartan finery, if you've got it there.
He's looking.
I love that picture.
While she's getting that, I will say we are so honored to be a part of this lovely production. We'd love to be visiting all of you islands in person, and maybe we will one day, but it's a real pleasure. We're delighted to have been invited, and it's a real pleasure seeing Alina and, of course, always Petrina and all of you folks as well. And you folks we haven't met yet, we will meet someday. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, so I think we do have to wrap up now, don't we, Mandy? Petrina and Alina, any final thoughts?
I was just trying to answer a couple of questions in the Q&A. Is there another one there? What was it like to do the film? Okay, I can neither confirm nor deny that I'm in the film until Mr. Apple tells me that I'm allowed to. But it was incredible. It was the whole theater, the stage, the seats were all cleared out, and all this Hollywood movie equipment was put in, and there's lights everywhere, and there's a steady cam and 2 handy cams and a crane, and like it was surreal, totally surreal. But part of it was actually filming in front of an audience and to step out on the stage again with people in the house. As soon as that boron started, the show opens and we all come out together to start the telling of the story. And it's the Derm Claude character who first speaks. And there was so much applause that he had to take a moment and literally turn around, had enough time to turn around, look every one of us in the eye meaningfully for more than a second before the applause came down enough for him to actually begin the show. I think that's going to be what happens every time a show reopens on Broadway. The first few moments are going to be very, very magical.
Amazing. Okay, and so I think we have to wrap up now. So I'm going to pass it over to Mandy to make the concluding remarks. But thank you so much. It was so much fun for me to host this, and it was great to see everybody. And what a great time. We could talk about this all day.
Oh, we could.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Thanks, of course, to Derm, to Diane, to Alina, and to Petrina for joining us for this presentation. And thank you very much to Janet for hosting, and to Alumni Engagement for partnering with us on this event. And thank you to everyone who attended, to all of our ISISA conference members, and to all of the general public. It was really wonderful to have you all here today. And of course, we'd like to thank the folks at Conference Events and Services at Emera Innovation Exchange at the Signal Hill campus. They were our tech support for today, and they've been extremely helpful. And I think that's everyone. I hope I didn't forget anybody. For our ISISA attendees, we have some breakout sessions starting in about 2 minutes. So be sure to check that out. And to everybody else, be sure to look at the link I sent you in the chat so you can have a look at the Welcome to the Rock performance, which is a fantastic end to Come From Away. And thanks again, everybody. Have a great day.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care, Alina.
Take care.
Glad you got to join us.
Yeah.